We are back with another episode of Korea Deconstructed, and I'm very happy to say we've got one of our favourite friends, guests, back here for the second time on the podcast and in the studio, Mr. David Mason. It's good to see you, sir.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Last time, your episode on Buddhism and temples and hiking and sanshin, people love that one. So if you haven't seen that, anybody, please go and check it out. And today, I want you to talk to me about, of all things, Mr. Mason, dragons.
Dragons.
Tell us about dragons, please, because this is what you're doing recently.
You go around Korea, they are everywhere. And I've just written a new book about Korean dragons and the king of the dragons as a deity in Korea. And the first thing I start off the book with is just the ubiquity of them. There's dragon and dragon beliefs all over the world and very ancient, from the Middle East and Europe, and then China developed kind of independently, but still dragons. And they're everywhere around the world. And dragon images are really popular. People love them on T-shirts and comics about them, and TV shows, movies, and cartoons are kind of endless for kids and all. Dragons is a very popular subject, and especially here in East Asia, they are painted on temples all over the place, on the upper parts of the walls and the beams, such, and in Buddhist temples, palaces, and such. So much that in just trying to think of like how many dragon images there are, say, just in East Asia, is mind-boggling. You'd just be counting in the billions. And why, it's really the most ubiquitous animal. There's no other animal that has been depicted as many times, and not even a religious figure like the Buddha has not that many times. A Buddhist temple will have 100 images of dragons total in it, maybe, and just 3 or 4 of Buddha. So it's amazing just how common and frequent it is. But there is no book on the dragons of Korea, so I felt I had to write it.
Are Asian dragons and Western dragons different? Because I'm from England, and St. George, our patron saint, famously slayed the dragon. Eastern and Western, I'm generalizing here, but are they different?
They became very different. The dragon beliefs coming out of Mesopotamia and then migrating into Europe have the dragons as evil monsters, breathing fire and wreaking havoc on people, burning castles and villages, and hoarding wealth, being very greedy, nasty, kidnapping the innocent princess, and then the brave knight has to go kill the dragon, rescue. And over here in East Asia, it's totally different. Dragons are good. They're beneficent. They bring water. They control the movement of water, just the opposite from breathing fire. They're surrounded by flame kind of images often, just a kind of energy, a flaming energy giving off, but they're not destructive in that way, except in the case of like typhoons or thunderstorms, flooding. The dragons are the reason that water moves. Over here, they observe that water's always moving. There's waves on the ocean, mists rising up, clouds going across the sky, keep moving, changing their shape, writhing around, and then rain falls, and streams form, and then springs pop up out of the earth also and add to the streams, which become rivers. There's waterfalls, a dynamic energy, and it goes back to the ocean. So it's a constant circulation. And that's what keeps human beings alive. Okay. Permits civilization, all the circulation of fresh water from the ocean to the mountains, and then fresh water coming down from the mountains, making the rivers that all of our cities are on and that feed all of our farms. Water keeps moving, and if it stops moving, it dies. A stagnant pond or whatever is very quickly unhealthy. Stagnant water is unhealthy to drink, and it must be moving to be living. And to the ancient traditional people over here in East Asia, the reason why water moves, there's dragons in it, making it move. And just only the wise can see them. The enlightened, we can't. They're invisible to us. And of course, dragons have a king, a ruler, a guy who makes the rules and does the directions and is responsible for droughts, floods, or proper rainfall, proper water supply. And he is to be respected, somewhat feared, but also somewhat loved and appropriated to give us correct, proper supply of good, clean water, and then our communities do well.
It's amazing the difference between dragons being, as you said, these hoarders of wealth and people that burn down villages and associated with fire. Then here in the East, benevolent, kind, bringing water, controlling balance. Are they the same creatures? Is it just a linguistic thing? Or why? Do you have any idea why that divergence occurs?
Not really, no. I just know that it did. Clearly it did. Dragons seem to have evolved separately in China, but then the iconography does become kind of similar between East and West, although there are significant differences in the way the head is shaped, or a dragon having wings or not. China went through a couple hundred years where they put wings on the dragons, and then they stopped that. They remain more serpent-style body, long, twisting, but without wings, but they can fly still. They just evolved in a different way. And they also in, say, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Latin America, there are ideas of these monksters, which are similar to dragons. They may be giant snakes that come up and have dragonish features or something like that, but it's pretty much around the world. But here in East Asia, we have maybe the strongest, most distinct tradition and the most allied with like government power, heavenly power, because the dragons flying in heaven, you can see with the clouds changing their shape and such, and bringing the rain associated with heavenly power and therefore authority and such. Since very early, the Chinese have myths going back 3,000 years at least of that philosophical wisdom was given to humans by some dragon-ish creature, or a dragonish horse or a dragonish tortoise coming out of the river and bearing these symbols that started Chinese philosophy. It goes way, way back.
So it might just be like how pigs are represented differently in different cultures, or we associate them with different qualities. Over here, they're sort of associated with money and wealth and all of those things. Yes. And when I said to you that I hadn't really seen many dragons in Korean culture, and you were almost taken aback by it, I think it's because I'm looking for Western dragons. Oh. And that's why I haven't seen them, because here they're different. And now I think I'm more attuned to them. Can I ask you this? Yeah. Do dragons exist? I know that's a stupid question, but when they appear in the myths and the stories, like if we see bears and tigers, we know sometimes it's animistic or it's referencing something. What are dragons then?
A friend of mine, Stephen Pryatt, rest in peace, before passing away, had a very interesting theory of here in East Asia that dragons originated with whales, of just a big water monster that was not really like other fish and had big teeth and a large jaw, at least a huge mouth with strands running through it, the filter strips that looked like giant teeth, and that they got the idea of dragons from that. There are Komodo dragons, we know that, but they're only on one island in Indonesia and probably have never been seen outside of there. So that's not it. And you would think, they look kind of like dinosaurs. So a lot of people just assume that dinosaurs are the origin, but no, there's no evidence at all that ancient people ever knew anything about dinosaurs. They hadn't found dinosaur bones yet or had any idea what they would look like. So, no, it's not that. But the idea of a giant reptile kind of figure. I guess reptiles were fascinating. So were snakes. Down in India, which is one of our major, very early civilizations, the Nagas, or giant snakes, developed and were regarded as deities, a kind of a god. And then when that belief came to China, they just changed it into Chinese dragons and further amplified it. But those were just based on snakes and just thought to be giant snakes and more intelligent and magical. And so dragons, they're lizards. They're sea creatures, amphibious, live in the water and also can be on land, and then later thought even to be able to fly because the way water is in the air and such. And just based on that, it evolved. There's only a few of these, imaginary animals. Another very prominent one is the phoenix, which again is both East and West, and been in many cultures. The idea of a phoenix, a magical bird and kind of a fire bird, and it relates to the Quetzalcoatl of Mexico, such. And that's an imaginary bird, but it's based on real birds. It's just more colorful, more beautiful, more excellent than real birds are.
Also associated with royalty often, isn't it? The phoenix.
Yes, the phoenix also. The phoenix is just as much as dragons in palaces, for example, the Korean palaces. Not used so much in Buddhist temples, but definitely in palaces became a symbol of royalty. So, these imaginary animals, I think they're just based on the animals that people knew, but just supposed to be more magical, more powerful, more even intelligent, and certainly beneficent, bringing good things like fresh water. Yes, so it developed as an imaginary thing and just kept being used artistically and in folk tales until it just became a standard part of culture.
I wonder if there was some use of people, monarchs, rulers, religious figures to legitimize their position by associating themselves with imaginary creatures, as if to say, I'm above you people. I'm something that, people would say they came from God in the Sun Kings. And
yes,
such.
Well, you always got to look at early history, that the idea that tribal chief is something very different from a king. If a king has royal blood and his family has royal blood, his son is the next king, and tribal chief is basically just the best man or maybe best woman of the tribe for leadership, and the next one could be anybody. So for when that transformation was happening all over the world between 2,000 and 3,000 years ago, mostly, where tribal groups and people started calling themselves king and wanting others to believe that and accept it. And it probably took a fair amount of violence to, you will regard me as king. But then part of that was magic, doing magic tricks, let's imagine, to make yourself seem mystical and magical. Now, this is those great crowns of Korea, the golden crowns, with all the bangles and jade. So when you move, it's shaking, it's sparkling, and it looks like with the jade crown and necklace and belt, whenever the man moved, he'd look like he was on fire, like little sparks of fire jumping off him all the time as the light glinted off those bangles. Therefore, he would look magical, mystical, and get with very primitive and maybe Bronze Age people, let's say Bronze Age, he would look divine and get people to follow him and agree that he's the king. So, that goes right along with these usage of magical, mystical animals. If you visit the palaces of Korea, you always see other animals done dragon style. You see, like stone tigers very frequently at the steps of the palace or guarding the moat, who are dragon tigers. It's a tiger, but there's scales on his back and one horn, or possibly two horns, on the head, and such. In a little bit more dragonish face than a real tiger. A dragon mixed with tiger, which just makes a more magical tiger. And then painted on the gateways up above, you got dragon horse, dragon goat, dragon rooster, dragon turtle, all the 12 animals of the Zodiac, the other 11 besides dragon, mixed with dragon to make them a more magical animal, you see. So there's that.
All the other 11 animals in the Zodiac are real animals, aren't they? I'm just slowly going through in my mind.
The dragon's the only imaginary one.
Yeah.
Yes, Phoenix is not a member of that 12.
Yeah. Right. For those you might be listening, if you're curious, because here in Korea they talk about what year people are born in year. If you were born in 1976, that's the year of the fire dragon. So if you go 12 years forward, that would be what, 98. No. 76.
88.
88, sorry. That would also be a dragon year.
Yes. And we just had the metal dragon. No. We just had fire.
Might be fire.
Is it fire dragon? The one we
metal
did
dragon
a few years ago. We're on the fire cycle, because now it's the fire horse.
They sound like the metal dragon and things. It's when you say they look like other animals, the dragon that I picture in my mind, which is Asian, is that one that I see in Hong Kong or the streets of Shanghai, the ones where people stand underneath it and it undulates, but it has sort of a tiger face, or has a fat, square face. Is that a dragon? You know the one I mean?
Different cultures have all their different ways, but in different parts of China, there's quite a bit of variety. But a dragon dance, you're talking about dragon dance, yes, done at New Year's, and maybe also on the 5th day of the 5th moon, which was the dragon boat racing holiday in China, which has become known as Dano here in Korea, Dano holiday. And such. Well, yes, dragon dancing, sure, as well as other kind of animal dances that they had in the folklore. And yes, everyone has different kind of faces. The one in San Francisco's Chinatown that I used to see looks pretty much like what you expect a dragon face to look like.
Okay.
And just a long, undulating body of many people holding poles, dancing back and forth. Sure.
How about in Korea here, the legends, the icon, can you maybe help try to bring us to life with some of the stories related to dragons? You've said that you see them, they control the water, they're in the top of temples.
Yeah, they have an uplifting energy. So you frequently see them on the beams of buildings, and even a dragon head sticking out of the front of the building on Buddhist temples, very frequently. And that kind of the dragon's body is the beam then going from that head all the way through the temple. Sometimes even put a dragon tail on the back that you can tell, or a dragon tail on the inside of the building with that. And they have an uplifting energy, so they're keeping the building standing, not letting it collapse, that big heavy tile roof that's held up by the wooden joinery. So just a mystical belief of that. And then you have your dragons painted either multicolored or a standard red and blue. Blue and yellow duality is often in the main beams inside the main hall of a temple or in a palace. One will have blue dragon on it on the east side, and one will have yellow dragon on the west. That's one particular belief about dragons. The blue in the east, yellow in the west, and they balance each other, kind of a yin-yang balance. But there's that uplifting energy and protective energy. Dragons are seen as guardians, just opposite from the evil of the west that would cause destruction, but protective guardians. They keep away bad spirits and invite goodness.
I can see that dragon you're talking about now so very clearly. I've just never associated it in my mind as being a dragon. That one that protrudes out of the top, almost on the rafters.
Dragon heads.
And sometimes they have a ball in their mouth, an orb.
Yes. Now there's the Yeoiju, Yeoiju in Korean, which is a flaming pearl. It's supposed to be a pearl. It's often either pink or red color, usually. Could be other colors. And it seems to have fire coming off of it, like it's burning very often, but sometimes just a round ball as a pearl. It's depicted in the artwork that the dragon is chasing it or kind of playing with it or getting it in its mouth, but never able to swallow it. And that has various interpretations. There's a whole chapter in my book about the pearl. Understanding it. It's seen as a wish-granting pearl, and that's the most common name. Yeoiju in Korea means a wish-granting pearl, that what you wish for will come true. But also seen in spiritual traditions as a symbol of wisdom. And then with a bit of duality with the dragon then, because dragon is like primordial energy, physical energy. And then this flaming pearl represents wisdom, and the dragon's dancing with it and trying to get it always, but cannot swallow it, cannot defeat it or fully possess it, but always is just dancing together with it. So this primordial energy and wisdom that side by side, the spiritual aspect. You frequently see two dragons like coiled up and a flaming pearl between them in many artworks. And they're both kind of as if fighting over it, or sometimes it looks like they're quite happy and joyful, as if they're just playing and dancing around it. They're wonderful to gaze at these pictures and kind of get the energy that's happening with it.
Does it suggest that they, not being able to swallow this pearl, that they can never become human? They're the energy before, because we have rationality, we have wisdom, we have that kind of thing, and that's where the Confucius places, isn't it? Between heaven and earth, we have the yellow of the Samtaeguk. We have that. Because when I was having coffee with the studio owner before you arrived, I asked him about dragons, and he told me many things, but he said before they become dragons, they're a different creature, and they have to evolve, and they have to stay hidden, and then they're trying to there's sort of life stages of dragons. And he was telling me all this in Korean, so I was going along as best I could. But they weren't just dragons, but there were stages of dragonhood.
Well, yes. There's the idea of achieving dragon status. And there's two different beings that can become dragons, generally. One is called the imugi, which is a snake, basically a big snake, a giant snake. And artworks of it are rather crude, really, just showing a kind of snake, almost phallic-looking being and such, with something of a human face on it, vaguely human, perhaps, such. And in imugi, they're thought to be very giant snakes, and they want to become dragons, and it may take 1,000 years of hard work and dedication. Now, this then goes along with the education obsession with Koreans of study hard, be diligent, follow the rules, and be able to pass the exams and become somebody big, become a big shot. This is there are many sayings in Korean about rising to become a dragon that are related to education or getting big promotions at work, or a politician becoming successful, or even a business starting small but then becoming big, anything like that. The other beings are fish, and there are many old Joseon Dynasty paintings of leaping fish, particularly carp, the carp fish, and leaping out of the water, which it does sometimes. I think it's trying to catch a mosquito in the air above the water or something and eat it, perhaps. But it leaps up out of the water, and they believe that this leaping carp is attempting to become a dragon. And again, it may take many years and a long time and diligent ambition, and whereas self-cultivation. There's an old myth called the Dragon Gate, which originated in China up to 3,000 years ago. I mean, the very beginnings of what we know of Chinese culture, the Dragon Gate, which means imagine like a big pair of cliffs and a waterfall in between them. So really a gateway, a stone gateway, and a mighty waterfall falling between that, and then fish trying to jump up the waterfall. And similar to the way like salmon fish are known to jump upstream and jump over rapids and small waterfalls and struggle to get upstream to breed that way. So the fish trying to jump up the waterfall, and it may take them many years. It may take a century of hard work for the fish, but if it can finally jump over the top of the waterfall and get to the stream on the top, then it may become a dragon. And this is called the Dragon Gate. So passing through the Dragon Gate or leaping up the Dragon Gate. I have a whole big section in my book about this, of those paintings, which are kind of ubiquitous. And there are many in Buddhist temples. If you look hard, like at the altar, the carvings on the front of an altar, you'll often see carp fish with a dragon face, so the carp becoming a dragon, or a leaping carp and such. And there are many Joseon Dynasty artworks about that. And they related that very much to education. There's a whole display in the National Folklore Museum just about that, a glass case display of leaping carp painting, and then explanation and other implements showing this, of how they would put that painting in the room of a student, a teenage student, to inspire him to, study hard, and you can leap the waterfall, meaning you've passed the final exams and you become a government official, somebody with real power and status. So there's very strong beliefs like that in the culture.
I want to ask you about snakes in this culture, and then the Dragon King, but just, you mentioned this expressions. One of the first Korean expressions I ever learned was 개천에서 영난다, and this is what you're describing here. 개천에서, from a small creek will arise a dragon, and it's from rags to riches. And if you are a lowly government local official and you rise up to become the king, that's 개천에서 영난다.
Prime minister, maybe.
Yeah, something.
Can't be king.
Can't be king, but from rags to riches. And I'll never forget one day saying to my wife, because I just learned the expression and it is ubiquitous here. She was saying, our kids can't go to international school. And I said, in Korea, don't worry, darling. 개천에서 영난다. And she looked at me and she said, I am not a 개천. I am not a small creek. How dare you say that? I said, okay.
You got to be careful.
There's one for learning Korean, people. 개천에서 영난다. I just want to ask, I'm detouring, but I'm really scared of snakes. But snakes in this culture, are they also seen as, to me, they're scary. They're an animal of the Zodiac. You told me dragons are kind.
They're a member of the Zodiac,
or are they also bad?
They have sacred status. They've always been seen. Now, all the animals of the Zodiac are in pairs. There's a senior and a junior for each one. And the pair there is dragon and snake. And now, dragon is definitely much better than a snake. It's much senior, and I've seen that the snakes want to become dragons, as you say. So it's very much, some of the other pairs are not, seem much more equal, ram and a rooster. No real clear winner there. So, but in that case, definitely. And as I said, in India, the Nagas, big giant snakes like big cobras, are important deities, protective guardian gods of Hinduism. And then they got involved with Buddhism and given very high status, like saying that the king of the Nagas was Buddha's first disciple, supposedly. Got the teachings from Buddha before anybody else did, and then became official protector of the teachings. But then when that came over to China, the Chinese kind of consider snakes kind of lowly as far as all animals go. I mean, it has status, but it's kind of low down as far as animals are, and not nearly as prestigious as, say, the horse or something. And so they changed those Naga snakes into dragons, into Chinese-style dragons in all the scriptures. They simply changed the word, in translating and put in dragons and depicted the dragons in artwork as being protectors of Buddhism, and the dragon kings as serving the Buddha. And also something I'm going to lecture to the Royal Asiatic Society about next week is that the dragon king got associated with the bodhisattva of compassion, which is a pairing you might not expect. Compassion, love, sympathy, empathy. This is just the opposite of what you think, especially in the Western terms of dragons. But they became closely associated, and the bodhisattva of compassion is frequently depicted in temples as riding on a dragon, standing on a dragon, or riding one. It's one of the main appearances of that bodhisattva, a blue dragon in particular, although sometimes yellow. And then the dragon king is also seen as appearing from the ocean as the bodhisattva is sitting on rocky cliffs on the shore. This is an actual scene from one of the most important sutras, the Lotus Sutra, that shows the bodhisattva of compassion. It has a whole chapter describing how is found sitting on a rocky shore by the pilgrim boy Sudana. And as Sudana is worshiping the bodhisattva and learning from it, the dragon king appears and makes offerings to the bodhisattva. And that has been depicted in paintings ever since the Goryeo dynasty. Wow. We have one painting from the 1200s showing that, and then others afterwards. So that entire big chapter of my book is about the bodhisattva of compassion with dragons and with the dragon king, and the complex interrelation between them, which you would not expect. But it turns out the Buddhists think, just to make it real short and sweet here, that the primordial energy of dragonness is necessary as kind of a propulsive element for compassion. That compassion is too passive in itself. Just the feelings of love, sympathy, empathy, they're kind of still, and it needs a dragonish energy pushing it forward to actually make improvements in the world and salvation. And dragon energy is seen by monks as something that can help them achieve enlightenment. That dragon energy in your body giving you the incentive to meditate and to study, and the kind of the ambition to keep moving ahead with your self-cultivation, that dragon energy. So it's very bound up with spirituality.
Those dual arisings as well that you mentioned, not only the animals of the Zodiac coming. I'm going to ask you to say something about those two characters. I just want to mention that when I was in Nepal in February, traveling around, that was the first time I'd been to temples and seen huge snakes depicted, like you're saying, of these naga. I didn't know them, but it was freaky to me to see these huge concrete snakes and cobras and heads coming up, and I was almost scared of the concrete. I had to tell myself, but wow, in different cultures, they worship them like this. You mentioned the Dragon King and the Bodhisattva. Some people, I don't know much about the dragon. Can you bring these characters to life? Who are these two things?
Well, it's always been assumed in East Asian culture that everything has a king. If there's trees, well, there has to be a king of the trees, which is the red pine tree in Korea. And for any kind of animal, there must be, or say, tigers were the king of all wild animals or such. And within the groups, there has to be a king, because that's just mirroring human society during the last few thousand years. So it was thought that dragons must have a king of the dragons. And in China, with Chinese Taoism, they developed 4 or 5 dragon kings. There tend to be 5 directions in Taoism: north, south, east, west, center. Center is a direction. That's why on your the painting behind the throne that you always see in a Korean palace has 5 mountains: north, south, east, west, center, and that's on the bill in your pocket. We do have visual here, don't we? Yes, the 10,001 bill. And right here next to King Sejong, that painting of 5 mountains, sun and moon. So 5 directions.
5 colors as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so it goes with the 5 elements theory, the ohang, Koreans say ohang, the 5 elements theory, which gets very complicated. And yes, there's 5 of pretty much everything that they put together, colors and characteristics of all kinds. Now, so it was thought in China that obviously there's an Eastern Ocean in China, an ocean to the east, the Pacific Ocean, vast. And there was a kind of an ocean to the south. They knew that, below Southeast Asia and going over to India, which those waters were considered the Southern Ocean. Then they just assumed that there's a Northern Ocean. They never saw it, of course, but there's the Arctic way, way, way up there. But they just assumed that somewhere was a Northern and a Western Ocean. Turned out you got to go all the way over to the Atlantic off of Europe, but they just assumed that after India there would be some kind of ocean over there. So the north, south, east, west oceans, but then the east was the leader, because that's really the real one for them and the most prominent, and like the direction that the typhoons come to China from. And typhoons are thought to be very big, angry dragon energy. So then the center. Now, sometimes they just depicted 4 dragons, but sometimes there's a 5th one, a center. And then there are 2 huge rivers in the middle of China, the Yonsei River, the Yellow River, and a giant lake in between those 2, Lake Tai, the biggest lake in China. And loosely, it was either associated with one or both of those rivers, and or Lake Tai would be the home of the central dragon king. All right. So that became a standard Chinese belief, and in many Chinese temples there is a set of either 4 or 5 statues. And the Eastern one tends to have the fiercest face, a face that looks even kind of angry and has very spiky coral kind of hair. Now, as that belief came over here to Korea, they pretty much just adopted the one dragon king, the dragon king of the East. And he's the one depicted in all these artworks with the angry looking face and the spiky hair. Always, I have 1,000 examples in my book that I show of Korean dragon paintings and statues of the dragon king. And he's the Chinese king of the East. He just became the dragon king in Korea. I could not find any historical representations in Korea of 4 or 5 dragon kings. And in recent times, some temples have built shrines. I've only found 4 of them that I show in my book that have 3 or 4 or 5 dragon kings. Now, 3 makes sense for Korea because it's a peninsula. There really is no northern ocean body of water to speak of, but then we definitely have an east coast, a west coast, and a south coast, being as a peninsula. So 3 dragon kings, that makes good sense, but I have also seen sets of 5. But those are all recent. Those are all developed within the last 20 years. So a new thing, and I'm chronicling it. I'm still finding new stuff as fast as I can. And right up to the point of publishing the book, I'm still adding new things that I find. It's that kind of a thing, and I'll have to update the book in a few more years.
So the dragons are connected to Buddhism. The dragons are found in temples. The dragons are they found? They're found in palaces as well, you said?
Well,
but they're connected to Buddhism.
It's in everything. I mean, shamans use dragons, dragon energy, and they certainly depict the dragon king in every shaman's shrine from Siberian shamanism. They include the dragon king. which is depicted in Taoist sort of fashion ways. It was definitely part of Chinese Taoism, but also part of Chinese Confucianism as far as leadership, the role of the king, which was all as a symbol. So the king wears a dragon on his chest, right? Embroidered dragon on chest and his shoulders. Look at all the paintings of Korean kings and such on the hat. And then Chinese emperors, very, very much associated with, they've always been associated with leadership, and therefore that's Confucianism, Taoism. And then when Buddhism came to China, yes, dragons, dragon energy, very much incorporated into Buddhist beliefs. And then in Korean Buddhist temples, dragon king shrines are very frequently found, usually found in most temples, usually right up the spring water. Because usually every temple has a good spring of fresh, clean water, and that's why the temple's there. In that location, you couldn't build a temple in a place that has no water, because you'd have to carry it all the time, right? So they usually have good springs at them, and at the spring is very often a Dragon King shrine with statue, painting, or both, or something. And I show, in my book, I show a couple hundred Dragon King shrines in a wide variety, because there's the fascinating thing about this kind of thing that's more shamanic and Taoist, there's no rules. Say, if you're making a book about, say, Buddha statues or Bodhisattva statues, they kind of look same. They're
standing up, they're sitting down.
There's not a whole lot in this whole, like, Korea that are really much different from each other to talk about, like the main Buddha statue in a central hall, because they have rules. The monks got to follow the rules in making Buddha or Bodhisattva images. But for the mountain spirit, my other big subject, and the Dragon King, and such, well, very few rules. There's just some kind of standards, like the spiky coral kind of hair, as I mentioned, and the glaring eyes, as such, but hardly any rules. And so the variety is just incredible. The variety of all these artworks everywhere, they're just never the same. And in my book, I just have hundreds and hundreds of photos of the wide variety of depictions.
Are there any, I now get an association with water. I can now see them. I like the idea of the dragon of the East being the scary or more ferocious one. Are there any stories or narratives related to the Dragon King? So I'm thinking now of stories of Hanuman and Ganesh, and they do things. Right? Does the Dragon King...
Many. They often appear in folklore, folks like the grandmother kind of folk stories, and in some of Korea's greatest epic stories. You know, the Pansori opera, kind of Korean opera, there's only 5 standard Pansori stories. Yep. Each one is an epic that to tell the entire thing takes 12 hours or something, and often they shorten it down to 2 or 3 hours of storytelling, and the movies have been made of them, and etc. 2 out of the 5 have the Dragon King in it.
Wow.
And in one is a main figure, but in the other, Shimchung, the blind man's daughter who sacrifices herself to the Dragon King in order to cure her father's blindness. But the Dragon King, recognizing her virtue and her righteousness in doing this, saves her, saves her from, she's brought out in a boat by a bunch of fishermen, and then she leaps out of the boat to her death in the water to sacrifice herself to the Dragon King for her father, but the Dragon King decides to save her and has her pulled out of the water over in China and become a princess in China. She becomes a beautiful princess in China, and then finally returns and gets reunited with her father, who has regained his eyesight from her virtuous act of sacrifice. All right, so the Dragon King is seen there as, in the beginning part of the story, Dragon King is seen as very strict and kind of cruel in that he's demanding this kind of
underwater,
human sacrifice. Yes, he lives he is generally seen as living in a palace in the water, not up in heaven,
like Neptune or something.
Yes, under the ocean. Yeah, Neptune's palace. Yes, sitting often depicted in the artworks of an undersea palace, and there's windows, and fish are swimming past the windows there, and he's got a big porch. And any people going to visit him can somehow breathe under the water, etc. But he at the beginning of that Shimchung story, he's strict and cruel, demanding a human sacrifice for good fishing, good luck fishing and such. But then he's also seen as good by the end of the story, a good Dragon King, because he recognizes her virtue and faithfulness and willingness to sacrifice for her father and her filial piety, and rewards her magnificently. The other story is about the hare, the rabbit, riding on a turtle going to the dragon palace. That's one of the most famous Pansori stories and one of the most famous Korean stories, because it depicted for children endlessly. There's so many children's cartoon books and children cartoon about the clever, think of like Bugs Bunny, a clever rabbit, a bit of a trickster. But then the Dragon King is sick one day. He's ill and sick, and his doctor tells him, think of some big fish or something acting as the octopus, maybe, as the Dragon King's doctor, and tells him that the only way to cure is he needs the liver of a rabbit. That'll be an herbal medicine to cure him. So the turtle volunteers to go to the surface, because turtle is amphibious. He'll go on land and he'll find a rabbit and bring it back. And turtle goes in and has a big talk with the rabbit and then persuades the rabbit to ride on his back, and the rabbit can breathe underwater by magic. And they swim down to the dragon palace. And then the rabbit finds out what they want is his liver, meaning he'll be killed. Yeah. But he's a trickster, and so he manages to persuade them that, I didn't bring my liver. I left it back home in a wooden box. Hey, if the turtle will take me back, I will get my liver and bring it back to you. And somehow they believe this. And, these fishy creatures don't really understand how land animals work, and they think maybe the liver is detachable that way. I don't know. But somehow he talks his way into it and gets the turtle to bring him back to Earth, and then escapes his fate. And again, it's a long, complicated story if you want it to be. But that's one of the most common stories, and shows the Dragon King as, again, kind of cruel and demanding, but on the other hand, kind of kind and polite when he encounters the rabbit, and then permits him to leave again. He's kind of understanding such, but also maybe a bit dumb that he doesn't understand what the rabbit's up to. The rabbit's more clever. So.
Inalchi was a band that combined those pansoris with sort of modern house music, and they told all of these stories. They got very popular, and it sounds great, but they do the pansori with the traditional voices and all of these stories, but with some lovely backing. Do sailors and do they sort of worship Dragon Kings, or when boats go out? Because
very much so.
You would have to, wouldn't you?
Byulshin Kut, which means a shamanic ceremony wishing for good fortune, has always been done in fishing villages by some shaman who either lives in the village and does it regularly, or a visiting shaman, somebody they hire to come and do it every springtime. When the waters calm down, the winter is fading and the fishing season really begins, and it's regarded as essential for a good catch of fish and also the safety of the sailors, because Korean waters are pretty dangerous. Always have been. Many, especially on the East Coast, many sailors didn't come home. The waters are rough out there. So they have these ceremonies to the Dragon King, and then legends and stories are told of fishermen who are rescued by the Dragon King sometimes, or fishermen who committed a sin of some sort and the Dragon King punishes them with shipwreck or something like that. Many, many legends and stories. But shamans do those, and in fact, Kim Kum Hwa, who was the maybe godmother of Korean shamans until she passed away, I guess about 7 years ago, something, and a very, very important shaman. Her main government-recognized activity was doing this Bilshin Kut ritual for the fishermen of Incheon.
Wow.
Incheon City, and she was a fisher, even though shamanism itself is mostly illegal in most of the country still, she was legalized in doing this ceremony for the fishermen and going out on a boat, sailing up and down and doing this ritual. Interestingly, down in the Philippines, where I spend my winters, I know a village and where the people do a very similar ritual once a year every spring, sailing up and down in a boat. And they use a statue of the Christ child, the Jesus baby, Santo Niño in Spanish. Use that and are waving that around and sail up and down in a boat back and forth across the harbor for good luck for the fishing for that year. Remarkably similar. But to answer, the fishing villages are very big on the Dragon King, and you can often find Dragon King shrines at fishing villages.
Wow. It now makes so much more sense when I was asking, do dragons exist and things like that, which was a facetious question, but now it's, do storms exist? Do rough waters exist? Do people not come home from fishing expeditions? Or do good catches and bounty exist? And it's people have always been at the mercy of the fates and the weather. And I guess that maybe in one way, personification of those fates, of that luck and chance of going out into the unknown, is to depict it as the Dragon King. Sometimes you can trick him, and sometimes he's benevolent, and that's what's in the water.
Sure. And this relates with mountain spirits and with weather spirits in other cultures and such. Because, the earth and the heavens seem capricious to us.
Yeah.
Things happen that we just don't understand. Typhoons, droughts, floods, or periods of good weather, and where everything's just as it should be and nice. And we often don't understand why that happens. And all over the earth, people had cultural rituals to try to manipulate that in some way to cause better weather and not have the natural disasters. So Korea is very much in that tradition, and it simply took the Chinese idea of dragons.
Yeah. Is there a god of the sky? So there is a mountain god, and I know sometimes the opposites is just mountains and water. Do you like the Sanopada? The mountains or the beach is a game that they play, and there's a famous line from Confucius, which is the wise man likes the kind man likes the mountains, and the wise man likes the water, and that's meant to depict the relationship between Confucianism and Taoism. Confucianism is the mountains that are upright and virtuous and never move, and Taoism is the water that flows and goes around. Water.
Well, that's also been translated a different way, a little different meaning, with the clever man likes water and the good-hearted man likes mountains, in that kind of mountain people, inland people, they're more stable. They're just in a community and they value the community and do the same thing every year. But people who live on the coast are more likely to travel. They're more like businessmen at import-export and dealing with money. They may be more adventurous. They're more clever and not exactly wise. It's just a different translation of that term and a little different spin on it, but both can be interpreted. It can be interpreted both ways usefully. Yes.
Is there a god of the sky?
Well, there was.
I'm thinking of Thor, by the way. My ethnocentricism.
Taoism had the Jade Emperor of Heaven.
Okay.
There was an emperor up in heaven and running heavenly affairs. So, and he would, kind of appoint the Dragon King to control the weather. So he had a kind of ultimate authority. And Neo-Confucianism picked up on that and kind of in their universal cosmic ideas, they believed in a dragon. And Jade Emperor of Heaven, but they didn't take him too seriously. They thought that earthly affairs are their main ability, and we just leave him to run heaven as he wishes. There wasn't a lot. Taoist people more would worship the Jade Emperor and appropriate him with offerings. Yeah. So it believed that there are heavenly gods, heavenly spirits, in various different forms, and dragons are one of those.
It's interesting that I think you told me this last time, that none of there's not an evil one, is there? That the idea of a personification of evil, the Mephistopheles, the Satan, the Beelzebub, the devil, the thing.
Not an absolute evil. Yeah. No, it's very important to understand that in the East Asian cosmology, like a disease spirit, a spirit that goes around giving smallpox, or these days COVID virus, or the flu, or cancer, causing disease in humans, is just doing his job. He's not evil. He's not giving diseases because of an evil intent. He doesn't get any delight from causing misery, but it doesn't bother him either. He's just doing his job, like a policeman does his job, which sometimes involves hurting people or killing them when needed, or a soldier does his job, which definitely involves violence in ways. You're just doing your job. And then good spirits who heal people and who make the crops grow well and all that, they're also just doing their job. They're not absolutely good. And it's there's the idea of Indra, which in Korea became Chesok Buddha, Chesok Bul, Indra, one of the gods of Hinduism, that his job, he's like manager of heaven, and he assigns the gods and spirits their roles and reassigns them every few hundred years or maybe a few thousand years. So a spirit who is bringing diseases to people may become a good spirit who helps clean, healthy water flowing in the next few hundred years. And then he might become a spirit that kills little children, or causes miscarriages, something. And then he might be a spirit that makes the grain grow well, or makes the pine trees grow lovely. They're just doing their job, and they get reassigned in jobs. Neither one is absolutely good or absolutely evil. It's quite important to understand that as a big difference between East and West.
And it took me a long time to understand that, and it made me watch movies differently. It made me look at the iconography differently, and it doesn't all come back to this, but then you have that symbol of the yin and the yang, these two opposites, which we've touched on, which is also in its own way kind of on the front of the Korean flag with the taeguk and the red and the blue. It's impossible, but can you give us some on Taoism, that thing that Alan Watts would describe by hitting his foot on the floor because you can't explain Taoism? Can you explain Taoism?
Looking at the changes and cycles of life, things go through cycles, as we know, with the year and with the day. The hours progress and the sun rises and sets and midnight and all that. And then there's the year, spring, summer, fall, winter, and there's the human life cycle, 60 or 80 years of infancy to maturity and old age. And all these kind of cycles, working, cycles within cycles. And you get to imagining larger cycles, higher level cycle of the cycles. That's kind of what they mean by Tao. And it's something that, we cannot understand it. We can't grasp it. It's too big. Just like how, say, the weather is so complicated that even now, with all of our high tech, they're pretty bad at predicting it. And any more than about 3 days in advance is just a crapshoot in most parts of the world for knowing what the weather's going to be. You can't really depend on that because there are so many complicated factors involved that make today's weather happen. And we cannot grasp it. And even now our supercomputers really can't. They've gotten much better at weather prediction, but they're still far from really dependable, and your picnic might get ruined. So those larger cycles that we really cannot grasp with our mind, but knowing that it's there and it is happening and it's all a cycle, and it kind of moves. The Tao moves in a spiral. It's not just cycling round and round and round, infinitely the same. It's a bit of a spiral. It's contracting, which is yang, or expanding outward, which is yin. All the different various cycles, they're moving in those kind of ways. And to try to grasp that and have a kind of confidence in it. I don't want to say faith, because that sounds too religious in a way, but just a confidence that there is this larger things happening, and it's a bit of a mystery, like the Tao Te Ching talks about the mystery or the mysterious female from which everything emanates, or all this. It's just things that are too big for our mind to grasp. And if you listen to Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson about astronomy, you definitely get that feeling. The cosmos is just the billions of galaxies, and it's just beyond really what we can comprehend. So, yeah, all that. And then living with that, adapting yourself to the cycles as best you can. Taoism says flow like water. You flow around things, you meet obstacles, and sometimes you can wear them down, but other times you just flow around them as such, and you try to adapt yourself to life and not fight against the currents, but flow with them to achieve success on your terms. And this involves being natural and appreciating nature. I would say Taoism is definitely against consumerism and all the flash and glitz kind of culture as such, and people wanting money and luxury products and all that. No, keep your life simple. Save your money. Don't spend too much of your life working to make money. You should be enjoying your life as you go along, and don't need to spend too much. Stay with the basics. Stay with the human heart, and it goes along with a lot of philosophies of the world.
Does this affect? I think this is the wrong question to ask, but how we think about climate change and things like that, if there are grand cycles of, I don't know anything, I'm not an expert, and I'm not trying to be controversial on this, but there is this, perhaps I'm generalizing, this Western idea that we can control the climate and we should manage it and we should be sort of shepherds of the world in the Christian tradition. And here it's like, stop touching things, like leave it alone.
Well, yeah. Climate change is a good example because it's something so big that even with our computers, we can't really keep track of it, and we're not sure what's going to happen next year. Like they're talking about a super El Nino is coming this summer. They're pretty sure of that. But then the effect that's going to have on ocean currents and typhoons and hurricanes and storms or droughts in some area of the world, they can partially predict it, and they can predict it up close, but they can't really predict it in longer terms. But they guess, they make models, try to understand, and then it is controversial how much our human activities are affecting that. I think it would be ridiculous to think that our human activities are not influencing the climate, because you look at the amount of pollution we put out in the world just by burning so much stuff, and putting so much carbon into the world, and we have lost so much biodiversity. We've torn down so many forests and jungles, lost most in the world, now 90% or something already gone. Then, of course, that is going to affect the world's climate. But in what way, it's very difficult to say precisely. And so people paid by the oil companies, it's very easy for them to say that, well, we don't really know what's happening, and we probably aren't affecting it very much, and it's just a natural change. So just leave us keep burning all this oil. Don't interfere in that. But I think there are certainly ways that we can pollute the world less and benefit from that. And like the amount of plastics we've been making out of oil and then plastics in the environment, the microplastics problem, I think it's a big problem and a definite change. And it seems to be affecting our hormones, and the hormones of animals are being affected by microplastics consumption. But in a way, it's such a big subject and needs so much research that it's hard to get a grasp on it of what's really happening. And you do have very powerful interests who want to just keep business going the way it's going.
Yeah.
The companies that produce all the plastics. So
it's politicized and there's financial incentives. And so I don't think these companies are being Taoist when they say, just let it happen. You're right. It's the same things that the tobacco companies and everybody did.
Yeah. Taoism is not just go with the flow as far as just let capitalism do whatever capitalism wants to do because that's the flow, don't fight against it. It's not that at all. Taoism does recommend being good, appreciating nature, being good to nature, letting nature be nature, shall we say, not altering the natural world too much, kind of trying to keep that to a minimum, because the larger cycles of nature we don't really understand, and we kick things out of balance like we're doing with eliminating species like bees, for example, bees that seem to be disappearing in the world pollinating, and then we don't know the long-term effects of that. We don't know, but they could be just terrible.
Yeah.
We could lose a lot of our food supply. And then what?
And then what indeed? When you speak about these things, and you made me understand dragons in a way that I had not before, and then we speak about how Taoism works in all of this, I wonder, perhaps as we just draw towards the final chapter here, what all of this means in the modern world, because the dragons and the Dragon King stories and all of these things, are we losing them? Have we, because it might return in webtoons, but that in the modern world.
I've been noticing that, dragon artworks are as ubiquitous as they've ever been.
Okay.
There's probably more of them now in Korea than there ever was in traditional times. Oh, I'm sure, much more. And they put dragons on T-shirts.
Tattoos would be pretty cool.
And such are all over. People really appreciate dragon energy. It's very big in martial arts. Various poses and moves in just about every kind of Eastern martial arts is given dragon names and said to be a dragon energy. It's kind of ubiquitous, and it's still very strong. And people love, like when we visit temples and just very ordinary people who don't know much about Korean culture, but they see a dragon painting on the temple, they like it, they're attracted to it, they take a photo of it, they think it's cool. And you point out the dragons, and people appreciate them. And the Dragon King is a fascinating figure. I finished my book with a small chapter on the influence of dragons on our own spiritual practices and development, where I just make my own speculations about this, trying to summarize everything, what I presented in the book. And if you are on any kind of self-cultivation path of trying to be wiser and healthier, living in the world, how the idea of dragons can fit in with that, of your understanding of the world, of your practices of kind of utilizing a dragon energy or being inspired by dragon images to the ambition of achievement and of physical energetics, and in many different ways. I think it's very useful.
Yeah.
And the Dragon King is maybe number 2 in Korea after the mountain spirit, as far as being just ubiquitous and important and seen everywhere and related to by every different religious and spiritual tradition, including including it or even focusing on it. Right there, the Mountain King and the Dragon King are right side by side as a yin-yang pair.
I'm going to ask you in a second if it's a weird question, but to close out, I'll ask you in a second, Mr. Mason, if you have any life advice, spiritual advice, wisdom. You've lived a long life. You've been through a lot, and I wonder when you look at the world today and you look at what's happening, whether you have any assessments on that. For people listening and watching, please do take the time to check out David Mason's work online. If you ever come to Korea, he does tours, and you've heard him tell these stories, and he tells them even better in person. When you're sitting opposite him or walking around a temple, imagine like the energy you would get from that. Do look for him online, look for his work at website sanshin.com.
No, sanshinsun.com now.
There you go. I'll
sanshinsun.com.
I'll put links to that, and on social media, he does wonderful posts. And
I really enjoy being a tour guide in Korea. I do it every spring and fall, 6 months a year. Take people around to the best places, sacred places. I especially enjoy historically important places. I don't do K-pop tourism, no. But sacred sites tourism, you might say, is a real specialty of mine. Mm-hmm. And talking about these different deities and how they do relate with our life, I very much enjoy that. It's my retirement time now. 6 months a year, I just spend writing books in my office, and 6 months a year, I'm outside guiding tours to these places, and that's a pretty good balance.
I can feel the energy, and you're right, it's a balance. Yes, it's that way. So yeah, please do check out David Mason. If you have any questions or you want to get in touch, please leave some comments. For all the people on Patreon that support, thank you very much. For everyone else, try to like, click, subscribe, comment, share it around, and spread the love of Mr. Mason. And now, to close out, I mean, you study this. What do we need to know? Help me live my life, sir.
I've come to appreciate the Stoic philosophies of not letting things bother you that you can't do anything about, that are not under your control. If it's not under your control, then don't get anxious about it, don't get depressed about it, but just watch what's coming, and that you can adapt yourself in your life. Try to do some good in the world, and that includes being a voter. If you have the opportunity, if you're in a democracy community, be a voter and try to vote for good people, the government. That's about all you can do. And we well know that the machinations of government with the giant corporations and all are kind of beyond our control. But we can influence that in a positive direction anytime that we can. Try to help people in your local community, people who you encounter. You see, try to make things a little better, ameliorate, not having negative emotions and getting upset and taking it out on people, but try to be benevolent and good, and keep your own health and vitality going, so you're able to benefit others with good action. These are just the very simple ways that you proceed. I was just yesterday at Dosunza Temple, where they have 3 bodhisattvas in a shrine together. It's kind of unique. Master Chongdam did this, made that shrine in the 1960s. The bodhisattva of wisdom, the bodhisattva of compassion, and the bodhisattva of benevolent action, of actually doing good things in the world. He put the 3 of them together as equal figures, as a way of teaching the public that you got to do all 3 of those. You got to keep working all 3. Wisdom, intelligence, understanding, compassion, the heart, love, sympathy, empathy. You got to have that working. And you have to actually do something, not just meditating in a cave. You've got to do something to help your life get better and your community around you get better. And of course, your own family. You're always doing that, trying to make things better, and you're raising kids. All 3 of those things working together in a balance, then you're on the right path. If any one of them is missing, you're on a wrong path.
Got it. Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.